I was focusing on these compositions of the singular figure in a space that really described where they were at the time. These transient places where there was a sense of impermanence. You can sense there was a story of migration there. There was a story of things that they were taking with them and things they were leaving behind.
Hi Melissa, thank you so much for joining us from your studio in New York, and congratulations on winning the Jackson's Painting Prize 2023. Could you start by telling us a bit about your artistic background?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I've been drawing and painting for as long as I can remember. I'm born and raised in New York City. I attended public school with a lot of really wonderful arts programs. So I was exposed to museums and art institutions at a very young age. I received my BFA from Pratt Institute in 2010, and I've been maintaining a studio practice ever since.
What are the kind of ideas that you explore in your work?
There's usually a question that I'm trying to answer through my work, and that question shifts through each series that I work on. So in this series of paintings that I started in 2021, I was investigating what identity meant for me, particularly at that moment in time after the Atlanta spa shootings and the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes in the US. Portraiture is not a subject that I've been drawn to in the past, but it felt important to do so in this series. And I started with references from my family photo album.
Where does a painting begin for you? What's your kind of process?
Yeah, my process begins with a photo reference. Usually it's a photo that I've taken myself, or it's from an archive of family or found photographs. I use photos as a starting point, but I think painting tends to move that image on a trajectory of its own, and the original image will transform along the way. I might hone in on a cast shadow, or maybe highlight an overexposure part of the photo, maybe crop out certain details to suggest some kind of narrative. And while I'm painting, I'm consuming other things that will inevitably bleed into my work, whether it's a book that I'm reading or maybe lingering images that I've just seen from a movie. And so I think in that way, painting becomes something new. It's an ongoing conversation between the past and the present.
How long does it take you from start to finish to make a painting?
I'm someone that likes the immediacy of painting, so it's why I use acrylic instead of oil. I was painting with oil previously, but I made the switch to acrylic because I really like how quickly I can apply textures and colors onto the canvas and not really have to second guess and go back or try to render the image. I'm not trying to replicate the photo. I'm really trying to capture some essence of the photo that had intrigued me.
You keep the kind of photographic element very much kind of in the spirit of the painting as well, like having the shadow as if from a flash, say. The colour palette as well in Out of Now is very kind of between harmonious and quite unsettling. Is that something that you drew from the original photograph, or was that something that you added in?
The original photograph was very washed out. And so I think when I started the painting, I started with a very neutral blue base. And from there, I started picking out highlights from objects that I found relevant to the composition, highlights on the face. And it's almost like, it's kind of like carving with paint. You're trying to bring out certain elements that you found interesting in the photo, and then push back elements like the darkness of the pants that I think really holds the figure up.
You're speaking to us from your studio. Can you tell us a little bit about your studio?
Yeah, I'm currently a resident at the studio program at PS 122 in the East Village in Manhattan. So I'm here for the next year, and I'm just really excited to be here and to hopefully create larger work since I have the space for it. In my previous studio spaces, I definitely had to put work away as soon as I was done with it. So here I can see everything at once, which has been really nice.
That must be quite important as well, considering that you're making a series of works, which, and being able to have them out allows you to have that kind of dialogue, doesn't it, between different works in the same series?
There are two paintings that I've exhibited them side by side before, I think because they're very similar in their composition. It has a yellow background and it also has a figure. It's of my dad when he first immigrated to the US and he was in Michigan for a job. So it was him in this very brightly lit hotel room.
How did you make the decision to enter these paintings into the prize?
I thought the two paintings together and separately really told the whole story of what I wanted the series to be about. I thought that without me having to explain the story, that you understood just from looking at these paintings that the narrative was already there, and also hopefully that it was interesting enough that you'd want to find out more. It's also been interesting to see my drawings and paintings together as well. Sometimes they can feel really separate and different, but I think seeing them together in the same space, it makes sense somehow.
That was something that I really wanted to touch on actually in your work, is the fact that you are both a drawer and a painter. Would you be able to expand a little bit on how those two practices inform the other?
I think they're two sides of the same coin. I'm investigating the same ideas and the same themes, but in very different ways. So I think drawing comes more naturally to me, but it's also a medium that I like to be very restrictive in my process. I've been working on a long-term drawing series where I only use a single color pencil. So for me, drawing is very methodical in the small festering marks that you make. So painting is a process that I can't control, and I don't try to. I just embrace the spontaneity of the material. And when I'm done, it's a painting that I couldn't have planned for.
Do you have any particular artist tools that you find indispensable?
My palette knives are my most used tools. I love how immediate and quick I can lay down paint with them. I go from mixing on my palette to sometimes immediately just laying down that swatch on canvas. And with paintbrushes, I tend to linger on an area for too long and get nitpicky. But with the palette knife, I'm forced to be more direct with mark making.
You said earlier that you used to work in oil and now you paint in acrylic. Can you expand a little bit more about your approach to materials and why acrylics particularly work for you?
I think acrylics works for me because of how easily I can mix the viscosity of the paint. So I can water it down, or I could just use it as is out of the tube mixed with other colors. There's something about acrylic, I think, similarly to the way that I draw. I'm not trying to hide the material that I'm using. So when I'm drawing, I don't like to erase or smudge. I want every mark to show on the paper. And with painting, I'm the same way, and acrylic works for me because I'm not looking to replicate a photo. I'm looking to really have those happy accidents where a color bleeds into another, or where an area is scraped off and restarted. And I think there's something really, really beautiful in that imperfection. And acrylic captures that for me immediately.
Painting has that kind of tactile element to it that photography maybe doesn't.
Yeah, that is what interests me about painting. I think when I was using oil previously, because it would stay wet for so long, I tend to go back in an area and try to redefine it some more. I think it's a very human thing to do, to just keep going and nitpicking, and I didn't know when to stop. So for acrylic, I don't have that option. I have to make that decision right away, and it forces me to be more direct in my decision making.
That's really interesting. It sounds like your work is very materials led, like how you let the characteristic of acrylic paint, its drying time, to dictate how you work, and you work within those parameters. I'd like to talk specifically now about Out of Now, which was the winning painting of Jackson's Painting Prize 2023. The title of the work is quite interesting, has a story behind it, doesn't it? Can you tell us a bit about that?
So the reference for the painting was a picture of my relative in their apartment in Hong Kong that I had found in a family album. I was really drawn to the bold way the figure looks out at the camera. And as I was working on the painting, my focus shifted to the very select utilitarian objects in the room and how homely yet transient that space felt. And also around the same time, I was looking at a book about the performance artist Ching Shea, and the title of the book is Out of Now. The cover of the book is a photo of the artist standing and clocking in at Time Machine during one of his year-long performances. So I think on some subconscious level, I incorporated that standing pose and composition with the photo reference that I was using, and just the concept of impermanence into this painting. So it felt fitting for me to refer back to that source for the title. I was focusing on these compositions of the singular figure in a space that really described where they were at the time. These transient places where there's a sense of impermanence, where you can sense there's a story of migration there. There's a story of things that they were taking with them and things they were leaving behind.
What makes a good day in the studio for you, do you think?
I think really any day in the studio is a good day for me. Even days when nothing feels like it's working and I have to scrap what I'm doing and start over. I think it's important to embrace those ebb and flows as much as the really productive days as well, because it's part of the process. So I just feel lucky that I get to spend my time creating art.
How do you know when a painting is finished, say when you were painting Out of Now?
I don't always. I sometimes I do have regrets where I wish I had stopped at the last iteration of that painting. So I try not to linger on a piece for too long. I think it's important for me sometimes to stop prematurely and maybe take a break from the painting and look at it again with fresh eyes to figure out if it needs anything else.
Are you going to continue working on this series of paintings, or are you working on something new now?
I'm working on something new that actually doesn't have any figures in the paintings. It's paintings that refer a lot to significant events such as funeral halls and birthday parties, but there are no figures in the paintings. And right now I'm just really interested in the mood and atmosphere of these significant events.
You are a New York-based artist. How does it feel to be the first international winner of Jackson's Painting Prize?
Honestly, I'm still surprised. I think I applied a few hours before the deadline because I was so unsure about whether I had a chance to even make the long list. So when I did make the long list, I thought, wow, what a nice surprise, and I thought that would be it. It's been a wonderful experience. I took a break from painting for a few years, and I started again in 2021. So the winning painting was a part of that series that I started in 2021. And so it's been really validating for me to continue painting. And I'm really thankful for competitions like this that support artists. So it's been an incredible experience overall.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Melissa, and congratulations again for being the winner of Jackson's Painting Prize 2023.
Thank you so much.